financials, in my opinion, a buyer's attorney needs to review the financials before anything else. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we operate at Romer DeVos and how most attorneys in New York should operate. So anytime that we're engaged by a buyer, let's say we're referred by one of you all to represent one of your buyers on a co-op or a condo transaction, the words due diligence come up. Now, what does that mean? From our standpoint as buyer's counsel, we want to review the offering plan, we want to review the financials for the building, and we want to review the board minutes for at least the last 3 years. At our firm, what we actually do is we give every buyer a written summary of all of that so that we put it in layman's terms so they understand exactly what they're buying into, what they're investing into, and that they're aware of any risks as they may exist. What we're really trying to do is to prevent a situation where a buyer comes back to us, or worse, comes back to you and says, "Why didn't you tell me about this? I wasn't aware that the building was going through a major capital improvement, and now I have this huge assessment." Or I wasn't aware that the building was refinancing its underlying mortgage, and now I have this huge bill. Or I wasn't aware that the building's being sued for $50 million. Nobody told me. And now I have to pay this assessment to cover legal fees and whatever the damages were. These are all things, believe it or not, that we can pull from the financial statements. So I like to do reverse math when I'm analyzing a building. So I typically will start with the financials and I'll look to see what's going on in that building, and we'll walk you through that process. And I'll also take a look at the offering plan, the rules and regulations, the bylaws. I want to know how that particular building operates, and I want to be able to explain that to my client in layman's terms so that they understand. But Tony, from your side of things, we also want to make sure that this is a building that the bank will lend on, right?
Absolutely. If you think about why a bank looks at a building, the word that they're most afraid of, which is something that you mentioned, is an assessment, right? So when a bank does a due diligence on the consumer, they want to make sure that they make enough money to be able to afford their daily life and also their liabilities along with their mortgage payments. Now, if you close on a customer and let's say the maintenance on the project is $1,000 a month and their mortgage is $4,000 a month. So coupled that together, their mortgage payment and liabilities are $5,000 a month. They want to make sure that you're not going to have future expenditures that are going to come down the pipe because there's an assessment on the building. So when I talk to a new buyer, somebody who has never purchased in New York City before, I will typically tell them, look, banks in New York will look at you as a buyer, but they're going to place a big emphasis on the building itself because they're afraid of that assessment that may come down the pipe, which will affect your debt to income ratio and your ability to make that mortgage payment. So they don't want you to be late on your mortgage payment and destroy your credit. So when banks look at you, they also look at the building itself that you're about to buy in.
So there's really two pieces to the puzzle, right? Whether it's a good investment for the buyer, and then whether lending in this building is a good investment for the bank. So Tony, just to kind of drive this home from your standpoint, do you recommend that buyers work with banks that have already lent in that building? Or does that really matter at the end of the day? Like if you're approaching this as a new lender in a building, is it easier if you've lent in that building before?
Absolutely. I think it's extremely important. I've seen, buyers get approved for a mortgage, and at the 25th hour, the bank that they're going with will say, hey, we found something in our due diligence and we can no longer lend in the building. Now, if you are a real estate agent that concentrates much of your business in New York, you'll realize that when you're working on a building or the bank is working on the building, it takes a long time for the due diligence to happen. Remember, you're working with third parties and there could be interferences that will delay the process. And at a bank, there's two divisions, right? One is going to concentrate on the buyer itself, which is they look at your credit report, they look at your income and your assets. So a bank will issue a commitment based upon that. And then you have another division, which is the collateral division. So the collateral division's job is exclusively review the project itself. So for a buyer to close on a mortgage, you need both divisions to come together and say, okay, we'll lend not only to the customer, but we'll lend to the building itself. Now, most banks in New York City have a master list. So I always tell real estate agents, use me as a resource, contact me, tell me about, what building you're looking at. And I plug it into my database and I can tell you if there are any issues with the building that we've seen in the past. Now, keep in mind, buildings are, they're like individuals. So things could happen that we have not seen recently. So if we vetted a building, let's say 6 months ago, and something happened in the last 2 months, we may not have that information. But at least we have a foundation of databases that can tell you whether there were issues in the building or if that's been resolved. So most banks that do New York City lending will have a database. And I think it's extremely important, which is a great point, that not only do you get approved by the bank for the buyer side, but to ensure that the transaction goes smoothly, you want to make sure that the bank has already lent in the building or at least have some documents that's pertaining to the building.